Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, everyone of all ages and backgrounds, welcome back to part 2 of what's your worst case of "but I don't want to" adventure you've ever experienced as a player or DM. Do note part 1 was already released over on the main channel, MrRipper. Links are in the description below. Thank you for tuning in, and without further ado, let's get right into part 2. I kind of have a reverse situation, I guess, where the characters all had a plan to go somewhere. And one of the other players had her character tell mine that he didn't want him to go because he said the wrong thing all the time. Mind you, this was in character, but this player was very passive-aggressive. I'm generally soft-spoken, so I was like, okay, I guess I won't go then. Anyway, I was left sitting there for 3+ hours not doing anything, and when I was like, well, I might as well go do something else, they were all angry with me and told me it was my fault. It wasn't your fault. You and the people that you were playing with simply weren't meant to be. Had a party, ended up owning a tavern by sheer dumb luck. Mob killed owner, they killed mob, took the deed, now owned it, not the gold, the deed. They then proceeded to run the tavern. They then refused to leave said tavern. They then complained the game was boring. But they ignored every hook I threw at them with the excuse, "But what about the tavern?" I kept asking them to leave the tavern and I'll give them the hook that they exactly wanted, but kept saying, nah, we like it here, even though they kept complaining about the tavern. I burned down the tavern for my sanity. They all got mad at me because I could have just asked, even though I had asked 2 sessions ago. I have a lot of DM PTSD from this party. Cool people, bad players. Only one I can think of off the top of my head was in a Hunter the Reckoning game my buddy was running. Our party was a ragtag bunch of normal folk who were brought together by some supernatural craziness. We were trying to investigate said supernatural occurrences, but every single thing we attempted to investigate led to a dead end. We were starting to get frustrated as we honestly had no idea what we were supposed to do, and nothing was done on the DM side to help us figure out what we were missing. At some point, the contact of one of the players was mauled by a werewolf. The player was introduced to some other hunters that were tracking said werewolf, and he tagged along to kill it, asking us to watch over his contact buddy while he was gone. He only did this because none of us knew what to do to advance the story. DM tried a couple of times to dissuade him from tagging along with the hunters, but he went anyways. Turns out the hunters and the player ended up being way over their heads and all got murdered by some powerful creatures. Turns out the DM didn't like our player deviating from the plot. I think that was our last session. I wasn't part of this one, but I heard it from my buddy. A buddy of his had been asking him for a while to run a campaign that he could be in. He said sure, and started up a new campaign specifically for him to play in. Dude then proceeded to ignore every plot hook, not even wanting to talk to the quest givers, choosing instead to just get drunk in the tavern, flirting with the barmaids. My buddy patiently tried to get him to participate and tried to get the campaign going, but the player dug in his heels. My buddy said screw it, packed up his stuff and left. Supposedly, the player had no idea why my buddy was upset. So we had a new player join a high-level game. He rolled up a gloaming rogue. Alright, we don't have a rogue, and have been dealing with traps by throwing the fighter or one of the monks at anything suspicious. But no, he keeps his character hidden at all times and follows us at a distance for 3 sessions. He won't engage, doesn't contact the party, just watching. During that time, he watches my character get pissy and tries to solo a hydra after marching across a crowded room, provoking half a dozen opportunity attacks. The next session, in combat, he tries to sneak up on this same character and pick my pocket. One full attack action later, his character is bleeding out. He tried to justify it by saying his character wouldn't want to adventure and just rob people, so it's what his character would do. To follow us around for more than a week, then try to pickpocket the half-dragon with obvious anger issues. Well, it was what my character would do. Murder you for trying to sneak up in a fight. Surprisingly, he didn't come back after that. Gee, I wonder why. Had a 4-player group. My personal ideal size. One day our group's ranger sheepishly admits to me he kinda invited two other friends of ours, a couple, to come check it out. Very apologetic, but social dynamics made it difficult not to let them join. I sucked it up, got them set up with some characters. Session starts and I introduce these two mercenaries as close allies of a trusted NPC. They have related goals to the party and have been vouched for by a friend. Easy, right? Ranger digs in his heels. My character doesn't trust these guys. Why should we let them join us? Whole 9 yards, like blah, 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 blah. Like, dude, your character may not like it, but you, as a player, a real-life person, invited these people without your DM's permission. The absolute least you can do is take the narrative hook. You owe me this. We had a little chat out of game and he apologized, but to this day, it was one of my angriest moments at the table. And with good reason. I have something kinda close. Wasn't really a horror story though. Well, that's okay, we want to hear it anyway. It was a modern fantasy setting where magic was real, but it was all kept hush-hush under something like the Masquerade from Vampire the Masquerade. All the world powers knew it and kept it under wraps from the non-magical folk. We all played characters who either possessed magical abilities or were aware of them, carving out a niche in the world and eventually getting wrapped up in intrigue. We get set up under a Mr. Johnson a la Shadowrun and are given a very expensive apartment as a home base, neutral ground from the big players, off the books and hidden from non-magical people. And told we have a month to come up with rent. One of our party members was basically a bounty hunter. Another knew how to get in contact with one of the biggest magical groups in the city. They each silently expected the other to drop a plot hook. Everyone else assumed the DM would. The DM assumed we would take the initiative and look ourselves. What did we all do? Pulled up Craigslist and started looking for curblers to furnish our apartment. We spent 2 out-of-game hours cherry-picking through free junk to furnish our fantasy apartment and shooting the shit in character. I love that. I think we even went to the local park after dark and played ball with each other. We got jumped by some plot on the way back to our apartment. All the players had a fucking blast trying to save the coffee table from bullets. The DM admitted to wanting to strangle us and didn't get why you would trade on Craigslist instead of looking for adventure in magical big city. But we all look back on it fondly. That game didn't survive long, but the setting had several different campaigns. I was a super drunk homeless druid in one. Years ago, when I was still in high school, I had a regular D&D group. One of my other friends was the DM, and his campaign was essentially a loose collection of wacky encounters. The other people in the group were constantly complaining they wanted a more cohesive, overarching story instead. After the current DM got upset, saying that he didn't want to run a game like that, but would play one, I offered to take over as a DM with the current party and run a more story-based game. The first session that I ran, the players that threw the biggest fit about wanting a cohesive story refused to follow any of my plot hooks. That session ended in a fight between us, and with me justifiably pissed that they didn't want to follow my story that they had begged for, and I think that game lasted maybe one more session. The only time this happened within my 3-person group is when the GM did a modern game with the idea of it going to be a survival-based post-apocalyptic game. We would have to find food, water, build shelter, and so on, but the apocalypse itself was going to be a surprise. As soon as it was revealed that it was a zombie apocalypse game, the other players, OOCly, aka out of characterly, was like, nope, hate it and don't want this at all. Because, and this was his main complaint, none of the PCs were doctor types that could find a cure beyond a bullet to the brain. There was no attempt to look out past what was basically 5 minutes before the start of State of Decay. We get back after a 2-week trip in the woods, we see a zombie with a machete in its shoulder. Game ends right there. No attempt to even try and find a doctor. As I have noted before, zombies was one of the few apocalyptic disasters that would not have been spoiled during the 2 weeks the PCs were out camping. I think the only other option was a virus outbreak, but would have had the same reaction as above and is a lot harder to detect. Most other end-of-the-world scenarios would have been hinted at by their effects or could not happen for other reasons. Nuclear war, earthquakes, other natural disasters, alien invasion, maybe, EMP'd by the sun, these would have been revealed revealed as soon as they happened. Robot uprising was not an option due to lack of advanced robots. I once ran an MHA college campaign that took place in a high school in the middle of the ocean, because why not? The player did nothing with his days but lay in bed and cuddle with his girlfriend. Weird noise in the hall, lock the door without checking, and go back to cuddling. Message to come to class, he's a bad boy and skips. Someone is in his room robbing his mini fridge. Sweet Tooth NPC who robbed the dorm of sweets. Hey yo, what up? Here's my candy, man. You're cool. Eventually, it took his girlfriend getting kidnapped Scott Pilgrim style for him to do anything, and he completely blew through any plot or suspense or work so he could find the location she was at to go fight whoever he needed to so he could go get her back. Edit. Oh, and forgot to mention, he left the campaign once after telling me he was bored. As a DM, this sorta crushed me, but the other players wanted to continue it. So I hosted the session with the 2 players. Minutes later, we all get a ping. Apparently, he wanted to host his MHA college campaign after I had already started my session. The players and myself were already busy playing mine, so he staked out the text chat we were using, making comments like, "Oh, she was nice," and "Man, that's a good idea." And after seeing the nerd girl do something smart, "Spark best girl," proceeds to name all his favorite characters from this campaign while the players are essentially integrating their friends over recent attacks on campus. Eventually, he says, "I'm going to give this campaign another shot." Smiley face. And makes a character who can shoot hot hash browns out one hand and cold ones out the other. DM'd a one-shot for my best friend, his girlfriend, and 2 of friends from their respective workplaces. Was fairly simple. Someone stole the King's MacGuffin, 3 other adventuring groups all had different leads on where to find it. They joined one of the groups and set off for a cave, somewhere to the west. They get there, and one of the players doesn't want to go in the cave because, the way I described it, it was too scary. I only said it was an eerily quiet, surprisingly damp cave. And anytime they found something scary, the player would complain about not having any hit points. They played a level 3 sorcerer in a party with a paladin, fighter, and a ranger. First combat encounter they run, hide, and complain that this is too difficult. 6 CR 1/8 bandits, reskinned to be mind-controlled husks. Comes back when both the paladin and ranger each one-shot one of them. Still said it was too scary because they were outnumbered. Then find MacGuffin guarded by an already damaged bone Naga. Bodies of the other adventurer groups scattered on the floor. I tell them it looks powerful, but very hurt. The player spends 15 minutes IRL trying to convincing the others that they should just run away. When no one listened, they huffed, sulked, and then interrupted the other players planning their attacks to say, "Sorcerer runs back the way they came, back to town." The others look at each other stunned. The paladin and ranger in particular really wanted to fight this thing, but Paladin, my best friend, didn't want to upset his girlfriend, the sorcerer, further, and just sighed and announced that the paladin ran after her. One shot ends without a climactic battle. No one got the MacGuffin, and we ended with them setting up their tents in the woods for a long rest. The next day, I talked with her and my best friend about it, showed her my notes so she could see that it was badly hurt and only had a couple of spells left, and further explained that I don't buy into the DM versus players mindset. I want the players to shine and have fun because I know I enjoy that when I get to play. She still plays in one of my campaigns and now gives me the benefit of the doubt that I'm not actively trying to kill the PCs. I'm just making the fights interesting. It's really nice to see when somebody can actually work things out in communication like that rather than having a bunch of BS happen where people have to get angry at each other. I'm proud of everybody involved in that situation. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA here, obviously checking in after the vid. Thank you for stopping by Riptovia. If you want to see more of our crazy, wacky stories that are narrated by myself or my fellow compatriot Dave, head on over to MrRipper. Links will be in the description below, especially if you want to see part 1 of this wacky frickin' set of stories. That said, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell so anytime we post a new story, you get notified immediately. And of course, subscribe to the main channel too, MrRipper, and to join our subreddit if you have a story you'd like to share as well. And using a help action, please come say hi to me, Brian Von VA, over on YouTube and on Twitch, where I stream games and talk about a lot of crazy fun stuff voice acting related. As always, I try to end things on a positive note. The one thing I just want to say is that no matter what comes your way, everything's going to be all right in the end. Now, it may not seem like it, and for all intents and purposes, it may not actually be okay right away, but things will get better. You just have to have the passion, the desire, and I suppose the sheer gall, the strength of nerve and will to just go forward. Yeah, you might lose a job. Yeah, you might lose a relationship. And yeah, you might lose your best friend of 30 years. But you know what? If it doesn't serve you anymore, if it doesn't make you happy, if something's wrong and you've tried and tried and tried, just keep going. Move on from the past. Take the good out of the bad and go forward. It's okay. It's going to hurt a little while, but you have friends, you have family, you have people who care, and most of all, if you ever really need to, you can always rant in the comments too, because, hey, at least I love you guys and gals out there. So that being said, I want everyone to move forward with a smile on their face, with new friends in their heart, and a new desire for the future. All the love, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.